Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel once again. I am potentially on my way to a motorcycle event. However, I am going to San Clemente to pick up one of my other friends that rides. So I'm going to meet up with him and then we might go to that event. We're still kind of deciding. I also have a dual camera on me today. I wanted to try it out, see how it goes. I tried to snug it the best that I can. Texas isn't just a state, it's a state of mind. Hell yeah. Texas. Can't go wrong with Texas. Anyway, let's roll out of here. It's probably going to be pretty busy over at Cook's Corner right now. So I'm going to try to go through the canyon and it's been really busy up this road because of the event. And it's close to me. It's about probably 3-4 miles, but there's a biker bar called Cook's Corner that everybody goes to, and it's mostly just cruisers and stuff like that go over there. So not a lot of like adventure bikes. Now it is open to all different types of class of bikes, but primarily what you see is the cruisers that are over there. Yesterday I was coming home from work and I was on my way over, and this car like quickly, I was kind of judging it, and this car was just quickly abruptly stopped and I had to slam on my brakes, and that's happened twice to me going in that direction. So anyway, I'm also going to discuss while we're on the way there to go meet my friend, do I regret getting an adventure bike and not keeping a dual sport, and should you ultimately stay in the small cc bike class or step it up and go to the adventure bike? I think it's really just your own personal preference. I don't think it's necessarily see what I mean? They're all out, bro. I don't think that it's necessarily a right or wrong. I think it really just depends on you and what you want to do. I knew for me that I don't necessarily like the heaviness to an adventure bike, but I've been able to handle it for the most part and kind of get through it. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, once you get going, you don't really feel the weight like you would like if you're parking it or you have it straight. So it just depends. If you're doing more like off-roading, lightweight stuff like that, then yeah, I mean, I would probably recommend getting a dual sport. Just like I think I posted a video a while back on my CRF 250L why a lot of people were getting into the off-road scene, because most of the street riders, you get kind of sick of the street as time goes on. A lot of people, they'd rather explore and go off-roading because that's a different type of scene. Now it does come with its pros and cons. You're probably way likely more to crash. You're way more likely to crash on a bike than a car regardless, but you're way likely to crash over and over again on your motorcycle, but you'll for the most part, you'll pick it up and keep going. And I've posted some videos where I've kind of lightly crashed or fell over off-road, but most likely you're going to end up crashing because you're not on paved road. And I think that's what most people don't understand is like, yeah, you're not on paved road and the surfaces are unsteady, unwavering. You're having to stand up, balance, you have to turn a certain way, and it's just a different feel, man. And it's a nice feel. I think it's a pro, but so if you're going to do more off-roading, my point is definitely just get a dual sport because it's way more light. Now if you're pondering whether you want to like go really like deep into the forests and the backcountry and stuff like that and go across state lines and where you're at now, then yeah, I would probably recommend an adventure bike, but you probably only need a middleweight, and then you could even get a smaller displacement adventure bike. Like I know right now they have the KTM 390R, the 390 or 390R, and that one's really popular, and I believe it's definitely lighter than my V-Strom, because this thing's like 507. It's big boy. If you plan and intend on doing stuff like that, then go for an adventure bike. The pros and cons to an adventure bike The pros are you got a big fuel tank, you can go on the freeway. Generally, you'll be able to pass traffic no matter what. You're not going to have that issue. The cons are going to be the weight and the maneuverability between traffic, especially if you are commuting. Adventure bikes are really not the best bikes to be commuting on, but you can do it. Absolutely. It has enough power and get up to do it. Also, you know, the more heavier you go and the more, you know, depending on if you get 1,000 or an 800 like myself, once you get into that parallel or V-twin class, you're gonna definitely, like, you know, end up spending more on maintenance. Now, thankfully, the Suzuki, I've seen the parts, and they're relatively actually cheap, believe it or not, for an adventure bike. But if you're to like get like a BMW GS like 12 or 1300, yeah, you're probably gonna spend, man, like a couple grand if a fuel pump goes out or whatever the case may be. So it's just really all up to you and kind of what you feel is best for your situation. You know, all these bikes are all subjective when you ride them, no matter if it's like the DR 650, CRF 300L, the Kawasaki, like any of those, the KLX 300. So it's all subjective. If you're a beginner, you should not be on an adventure bike like this, even if it's very maneuverable. You know, you should not be on a bike like this if you're starting off. I just don't recommend it. And I don't recommend a lot of things. You know, this isn't like, you know, set all be all advice. I went to Best Buy this week to pick up actually this mount for the second camera, and I ran into a guy that has a Hayabusa, and at first, you know, he quickly ran outside, saw my bike while I was shopping, and then while I was in line, he kind of caught up with me, and he was like, dude, is that your GS outside? I'm like, I don't drive a GS, bro. And he's like, oh, the gray bike, right? And I said, yeah, that's a V-Strom Suzuki. And he's like, oh, shit, my bad. So he kind of conflicted both of them, which rightfully so. He's not used to, you know, adventure bikes or dual sports. He only is used to kind of sport bikes and stuff like that. I just told him, I'm like, yeah, the V-Strom's really nice. It's really reliable, probably way more reliable than the BMW. And it probably performs decently well next to the BMW. The BMW still has more advantages, but for the most part, I mean, it has all the modern features you would ever need. And I said, you know, and he's like, yeah, like I've considered, you know, getting a adventure bike at some point. I'm kind of getting tired of the Hayabusa. I think I'll keep it, but maybe get a second bike. I'd really like to go off-roading and cruising and exploring and stuff like that. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, dude, adventure bikes are the way to go because, again, they have bigger fuel tanks. They have pretty good reliability, and they're parallel twins, so you're not going to really feel a lot of vibration on the road. So why not? I mean, I told him, I'm like, just go ahead, bro. Like, go check them out. Go see what's up. And so now he's kind of interested. And there's a lot of people that for the last year or so, they're interested in getting an adventure bike and they're wanting to ditch their street bikes. And I would say just, you know, adventure bikes are the, you know, I don't want to say they're the GOAT, but yeah, they're really fun to ride if your riding consists of long distance and more back road discovery. If it's just going to be local, then there's no real point to getting an adventure bike. I've even thought of myself, I was close to getting back on a dual sport. I was thinking about going back to the DR, but I went to the dealership and I drove all the way out there, and I had to drive about an hour away because they had this specific model that I wanted in a certain color. And I ended up just saying, I'm sorry, like, I made a mistake. I actually want to keep this bike. I don't really want to give it up. And they understood. They were like, yeah, no, for sure. We've never heard something like that. Usually if someone doesn't like a bike, they trade it out for another. They either pay us cash for the difference or finance it. And I just told them, I'm like, no, I had a change of heart. I just really like the way that this bike drives, and I don't have really a reason to give it up. I like the quick shifter. I like the ABS. I like all the modern safety features. You know, like, I don't really have a need to swap it out immediately. If anything, I'll just buy a second bike, like I've said before. But I was kind of quick to want to get rid of this because of the weight. I thought this is going to be too much to handle, and little did I know that, you know, I would fall in love with it going long distance all the way up on the highway. And I'm not looking back, man. Like, this thing honestly is probably one of the best investments I've ever made, if I'm being quite frank. Like, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's just a really good bike, man. So, you know, again, I don't know necessarily if this has helped you decide whether a dual sport is right for you or an adventure bike if you're already riding. If you're not riding, or if you're a beginner and getting into it, please just stick to a small little dual sport like a TW for your own sake. Do not buy an expensive adventure bike. And most people, I think, with common sense know that. You hear it over and over again, you know, like on the internet. Like, don't buy something big. And for the most part, I think most people follow that logic. But there are some people that still, they think that they need like a lot of power because they're going to get bored with it. And I can tell you that small displacement bikes are actually really freaking fun. And I know there's tons of YouTubers on here that have explained that, but I can say from firsthand, going through the bikes that I have, that I agree with them. I really do. Kid is like looking at me. They stare because they know that they think this is cool. And eventually one day it's kids like that they see me one time, and they'll remember, if they have a good enough memory, they'll remember that all the way through their teen years. And then once they're finally 16, they're like, shit, I remember back in when I was 10 years old coming back from a softball game from, you know, my dad. He was taking me. I saw this cool guy on this bike, and now I want to ride. And then he gets into whatever type of riding he wants to get into. So motorcycling can be very influential to some people. Not everybody, but to some people. Motorcycling in general, I like what Cycle Cruises said on his channel. It's just meant for cruising, man. It's not meant to go, you know, 100 miles down a 45. It's just not meant for that. You know, you're going to get yourself killed. And it's sad when I hear stuff like that about people getting killed and, you know, they weren't conscious. Just this week, I talked to somebody at my work, and they said that their husband had passed away due to a motorcycle crash. I think he had a Harley or some type of cruiser. I don't know if it was a Harley or an Indian. Could have been either. But then, you know, I asked a couple questions, and I always ask this. I'm like, so, you know, what was he riding? And they explained, yeah, it was actually, I think from my recollection, I think he was on a sport bike. And I simply asked, like, how fast was he going? And they said he was going very fast. And he was going through these windy, twisty roads. And on top of that, they said that they think he was actually intoxicated. Now, that's just textbook, bro. That's textbook when you come out here and you get your M1. Like, that's textbook, you know, in the books. Like it says, most crashes result in speeding, not wearing gear, protective clothing, clothing that's fluorescent, meaning people can see you on the road, and you wheeling or doing all these things, and on top of that, intoxication. So drinking and smoking and doing all this stuff, you don't do that on a bike, bro. Not even in a car. So what makes you think on a bike it's any safer? If anything, you know, you're already at a risk no matter what. Like, what makes you think that that's going to be any better? It's stupid, bro. So, you know, teach their own again, right? You know, again, when I heard that, I told the person who was telling me that, I said, well, you realize that what you just said is all in the textbooks? That's everything that you learn when you're first getting a bike. They teach you that in the classes. And he's like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, what do you think? They don't teach us anything? Like, no, dude. They teach you, especially in California, because it's so, the laws are so crazy out here. CHP's teaching it with you, and they're teaching you stuff that they also cite people for that are on bikes all the time. So of course, like, they're gonna say that and, you know, teach you the right from wrong. You know, like, always, you know, like even right now, I'm shifting down. And I don't always have to rev match, I just do it just because I like the practice of it. But using the front and rear brake simultaneously and trying to gradually increase it rather than just slamming on the brake. You slam on this front brake, your whole fork, you'll get what's called a fork dive. Your whole front fork will dive in front of you, and you're going to look like an idiot on the road, and then you have a potential to drop the bike, especially this bike. It's super tippy because it's heavy. You know, so you always kind of pose that risk. Look, I'm not saying I'm an expert in this stuff. I'm fairly still new to riding. I'm still a novice for sure. But from what I can already gather and what the miles that I've already done on the different bikes that I've had, I can tell you that if you just listen and you pay attention, like right now, I have a tendency to just scan my mirrors, dude. Like, who's coming up from behind me? Who's in front of me? Is anybody backing up or doing anything weird? Do I have an exit route to go through in the event that somebody's coming up too quick? Yeah, I can pivot right here. I could easily right now, and even when I was coming to a stop, just stop right over there. But I don't do that because I don't really like to lane filter all the time. It's more of a risk. Am I willing to take the risk? Yeah, at times if it makes sense for me, sure. Lane filtering's advantage, especially at stop signs, is if you're in the middle between, you know, the broken lanes like this, you're less likely to have somebody come up from behind and rear end you. That's probably the worst thing, is having somebody rear end you. And like Cycle Cruiser says, you're gonna have a real effed up day. So yeah, man, I mean, at times, sure. Will I lane filter when I come to stops? Yes, absolutely. You know, I'm probably going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. As always, feel free to leave a like and a comment. Consider subscribing as well. It really helps out the channel and the algorithm. And with that, I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.